Right, good evening, everyone. I hope the recording is working. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for Services. I'm Carol Coburn and I chair this committee, and on my left is Philip Townsend, who is my vice chair. And on my right is Julian Hickson, who will tell you what he is because I've lost track.
He is apparently the Joint Strategic Director.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
Sorry.
sorry.
I am the Joint Strategic Director for Housing, Communities and Environment. It says on my badge.
Thanks very much, and I'll try not to do that noise again. Apologies for absence, please, Kizzy, and subs.
No subs, but we've had apologies from Councillor Rabini.
Thank you very much. The minutes of the meeting, they have been published on the website. Are you content that I sign them? The meeting of the 25th of June, not the simultaneous one. Declarations of interest, Kizzy, any? Is there a problem? 5, 6. Declarations of interest, Kizzy, any before the meeting?
No, none received.
And questions from members of the public or from members?
No questions from members of the public and no questions from members. Thank you.
Which brings us on to the matters on the agenda. The first one, the Committee Forward Work Programme. I hope you all received the updated version that Kizzy sent out this afternoon. That's the one that we'll obviously be looking at. And is James with us? Is he behind me? Kizzy? Is that way?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, are you ready, James, to take?
Yeah, sorry, yes, I don't know what I was waiting for. Okay. Hopefully, as you said, everybody's seen the update. The report, I'm basically asking you or suggesting that you do 4 things. The first thing is the first three recommendations on your tracker there. I think reading them, they've been enacted. And so it would be a good idea to note the update and remove them from your tracker. That's the first thing I'm going to suggest you do. If I run through all 4 and then you can discuss or agree or not. The next thing is the subsequent 6 items on your recommendations tracker. Some of them look like they've been enacted, but I would suggest you request, as it says on the update there, request a progress update and get that for your next committee meeting, and then formally note them or agree how you're going to progress them and remove the ones from the tracker that have been enacted. The third thing, just turning over the sheet, is your other resolutions. That's the PSPO update. As it says there, that you've actually received a report on that and you've agreed to support the extension of the Waverley PSPO. So as it says there again, I suggest you note that update and remove that item from the tracker. And the last thing that I'm going to suggest you do is item 6 on your upcoming items. That's the revised statement of community involvement. Again, on the 23rd of January, you noted the statement of community involvement report as minute 44 refers, and that has since then been to the executive and full council. So it's okay to remove that item, I suggest, just to clean up your work programme a little bit. And a 5th item, I think I'd suggest, is you try and have a work programme which gives you all your items for the remainder of the municipal year, which meetings they're going to, and all the unscheduled items which you're interested in, just so everybody's aware, officers, members of the public, and so on. So, yeah, I can recap those 4 things again, but I think they're quite simple there in the update there. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thanks, James. I mean, reading them, it seemed to me eminently sensible, and it's been a great frustration that we haven't been in charge of the agenda and things that we've put on the agenda haven't materialised. It's been bitty, to say the least, through no fault of anyone in particular. We just haven't had the help available, you know, and the people that are helping us have not had the time to devote to looking at this in detail. So should we just go through, as James said? You've all got this, have you, with the red? Yeah. So the first one, The local plan, consider noting, everyone quite happy with that? Stop me as soon as there's one. Remove that one. Same with the clean air strategy plan. We are going to get an update, we hope, on the clean air, but not, that particular aspect of it. And then over the page, the local plan part 1 review, again, it's all been through. Consider noting the update and removing that from the tracker. Everyone quite happy with that? I think that's eminently sensible. And I must say, I think this next suggestion, James, is a really good one, because, we don't really monitor very well where our, what our recommendations lead to, where we go. So I think all 6 of those, I think I would agree, which we should request updates from. Is everyone in agreement with that? Yeah, agreed. So over the page then, that's the 6, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. Then we've got another one from the PSPO that James mentioned. Again, we've got an update on that. So shall we just agree to note that at the moment and remove that from the tracker? Yeah. So the upcoming items, and this is something that's so important, which is the bit we really ought to concentrate on most of the time, is to make sure that we do have important subjects to look at between now and the end of the year, which is rapidly coming upon us. So the simultaneous meeting that was held on the 15th of on the 10th of September. I suppose at the moment there's nothing we can do with that, is there, James? I mean, other than ask for an update much later.
No, I don't believe so, Chair. Particularly when the service plans come through, I think that's something you look at, but they're feeding or they're derived from the corporate strategy. Yeah,
we're looking tonight, as you can see, at the Thriving Communities Commissioning Fund. The museum service, we'd hope that would be ready tonight, but that's scheduled for the 19th of November. Antisocial behaviour or policy. This is new to me, James. What is it? And this is for staff and no? Well, who's the it says antisocial behaviour policy together with process and procedures for use by all council departments.
The only bit of that item which I understand is the 7th of January executive. I didn't put the rest of that on, I'm afraid.
Right, no, Sam is nodding way sagely, so let's go over to her.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding of this is that it is the corporate antisocial behaviour policy that has been worked upon by the communities team that now brings together housing, environmental health approaches into one corporate document. So David Hollingsworth is working on that. That will come to you to then have comment from the committee and recommendations that we will then take to the executive in the hope that it would be adapted or adopted even. So thank you. Adapted would be fine as well, however, yes. Thank you.
Yes, it would be nice to adapt it slightly before we adopt it, wouldn't it? On to, yes, we look forward to the Safeguarding Children in November. Is there anything else in November? Or the air quality? Do you think we really will get that in November? It would be nice to have an update on that. Right, thank you, Richard, for that. Right. James, do you think we have adequate agendas, as it were, between now and well, early 25, I should say, yeah, we're late 24.
Sorry, I didn't catch the comment before you spoke, Chair.
No, I just wondered if that is a full enough agenda or too full for what we're proposing in November. Obviously, there's a run over into 25.
I recommend in Guildford between 3 and 4 items per meeting only, and do the quality and not the quantity, because if you miss something, then you could be accused of rubber stamping something that you've not scrutinised properly. So you're better just to do fewer things well.
Right, thank you for that. Any comment from the committee, or are you quite happy to follow James's suggestions to the letter and then see if perhaps next year, 2025, we can get better control of our own agenda and perhaps some better notice of what's coming down the line so that we can actually give it reasonable scrutiny. Everyone quite happy with that approach?
Great.
Good. Thank you, James. That was most helpful, really helpful. Thank you very much indeed.
There's just little item 6. Did you want to remove that from your upcoming items?
Sorry, James, which one were you talking about?
The revised statement of
Oh, that
community
one. Oh,
involvement.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, that's redundant now. That's fine. Thank you very much. Everyone quite happy with that? I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. I think one of our frustrations really with all the planning is that we're not really being kept up to date with any of it. And that's why I liked your suggestion that we get updates on what we've put forward already, because you know, I have not a clue really what's going on at all in some of these things. So I think requesting the updates on those items will be most helpful to get us up to speed with where we are on some of the matters we have seen but haven't seen recently. Is everyone quite happy to move on? Sorry, James.
Sorry again. Sorry, I should have come in, shouldn't I? I think it's really useful if you formally request that your work programme goes to the end of the municipal year at least. And then that will help whichever Dem Services officer is tasked with doing that to say this is a formal resolution of the committee and it has to happen.
Right. So what are we saying has got to happen? All these items have got to be seen by the end of this year?
No, you'll have a work programme. At the moment, it goes to 19th of November and there's a 2024. It goes all the way through till May 25. Every meeting is there. Every item which is scheduled for every meeting is listed. Every responsible officer and relevant exec lead councillor is there as well. And then the public can see that. They can see if they want to come along. You can perhaps see if you want to invite members of the public or organisations along to particular meetings to see if they want to contribute to the discussion on particular items.
Right. Are we all in favour of such a resolution? Can we have the exact wording of it? Councillor Keane? Oh, you are in favour. Oh, you're just in favour. Right. So, yes, in the wording that you put forward, James, we're fully in favour. Could you just remind us what it was?
I made it up as well along. The overview and scrutiny work programme be completed for the remainder of the municipal year.
Right. Is that agreed by everyone?
Yeah.
Good. Right. Thank you again, James. That's really good. On to the next matter, the corporate performance report. And this, as you will have seen, is very different. And Jenny is going to explain to us the differences and the improvements, I hope. And it's supposed to, I hope, give us a better idea of the sort of trend as much as what we're looking at, because I think the previous ones we, weren't really quite sure what we're looking at half the time. So, Jenny, if you'd like to introduce this and give us as much detail as possible. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. I did send an email prior to the simultaneous meeting, just informing both the overview and scrutiny committees that the Q1 report was not, because the corporate strategy has not yet been approved or adopted, and the corporate performance report is going to be a mechanism for monitoring and reporting on the progress towards the corporate strategy and the delivery plan. In Q1, because the corporate strategy hasn't been adopted, and we're in the process of developing the report to monitor and report on the progress. It was in draft format, and it was suggested that it didn't come to this meeting, but and I think you agreed with that comment. the Resources Committee wanted to see the data. They felt that understandably by November, the data would be out of date. So hence you've got a report that is not complete. It's still in draft format, but all the data within the report is actual factual data and it's accurate, but you will see comments missing. The format might change slightly because that will be formalized once the corporate strategy has been approved and adopted at full council. So if you look at the report, the first 3 sections at this stage will be scrutinized by this committee. They are a more sustainable borough, a more prosperous borough, and a more inclusive borough. And at the moment, that covers the first 23 KPIs. So it will be any questions you have on the data. I'm happy if we can answer those. Then we'll answer them this evening. Otherwise, I can take questions away. And also, if you have any comments on the format or the way it's presented, I'm very happy to hear those comments as well.
Thank you very much. It's certainly very different, isn't it? You know, it takes a bit of time to realise you're looking at the same information just presented differently. Well, similar information.
The information is all exactly as you've had in previous quarters. It's just presented differently, and it's presented to try and give you as much information as possible to put it into context. I've also included background information to try and contextualize the data.
In terms of trying to work out whether there's a trend, it's too soon, I take it, because we're not looking at exact levels. So when, you know, if we just turn to tree applications, because it happens to be the first one there, you know, I mean, we can't do any trend from that, can we? Because this is the first time. Or, I mean, were these all done on the same data? What I'm trying to say is, are we comparing like with like? Or do we just really have to concentrate from Q1 onwards?
No, so you can look at the data. We've always had the tree applications data in the quarterly performance report. So the information that's there is all, it's all accurate, and it is as has been over the last 5 quarters. So, yeah.
What I'm trying to, you know, see is whether we can see a trend, because it was so difficult in the other one to see a trend. You know what I mean? You could see a column, but there was so much extra information, or I don't know. It was much more complicated than this format. I think. I don't know about anybody else. This strikes me as infinitely more simple, and I like the background information because so often we ask questions about that. Did I see 2 in? Did you wish to speak? No? I thought you were.
All I was going to say, Chair, is that you've got the summaries at the front end of this, where it's just one line with a colour for each of the KPIs. But if you roll down to page 23, you do get all of the detail around tree applications. And then you go forward, you'll get the details with the graphs and the trends and everything else.
So basically, we look at these. These are just a slightly bigger version of the first 2 pages, giving us an overall, right? And then where did you say we get the more detailed bit? On trees, for example? Page 23.
There's page 23.
Well,
yes, one you were looking at.
oh, that's the one I'm looking at, Richard. No, I've left those behind because they're so simple that I think most of us could work those out without too much help. No, I was looking at I'm looking at page 23, tree applications, and I just want to make sure that when we're looking at a trend, you know, that the 2 greens mean good. You know, we're on our way on trees. Okay, dare we look at another one? You know, just to see. Fly tipping, that's always a good one, isn't it? To see. And yeah.
When we'll have the complete report, the narrative, you know, the comments will actually explain to us the reasons behind the greens, the red and the amber. Because at the moment I see these figures, I'm like, oh, brilliant. Green is so pretty, but what does it actually mean? Is it sustainable? What has changed? Is that what you're going to be putting in the comments for us?
Yes, so some of them at the moment do have comments in, and others don't have comments, and that's just because working on the corporate strategy and this, we've been trying to decide which KPIs to include. It ultimately will depend on the final corporate strategy, what KPIs are relevant to show progress and reporting on the corporate strategy. So the point of the first one is to see the format, and all the data that you've previously seen, you can see in this document. Just obviously some of them don't have comments yet.
Yes, Councillor Busby, sorry, you indicated earlier, didn't you?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, the new format does make sense to me, certainly linking it directly to the corporate strategy. It will take a bit of getting used to, I think, but it looks simpler. Obviously, when the commentary goes in there, then it's going to become a much larger document. And I guess the temptation is to make that commentary more concise than in previous reports, but it was actually really helpful to have that background information as to why some things were up, some things were down. Otherwise, I think at this committee, there would be a lot more questions if it wasn't as thorough. The additional background information, a really useful addition, I think, particularly where it's showing us in comparison with other Surrey authorities as well. That really does provide much better context to the figures. So yeah, I like it, but I wouldn't want to lose the, I know we're not suggesting losing it completely, but I thought the commentary in the previous report worked fairly well. It was quite long-winded, I guess, at times, but all useful information for us.
Right, who was first? Richard, and then Jenny.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to comment on the fly tipping, but if you want something more general.
Oh, sorry, when I saw you sitting there, I thought of fly tipping. So, yes.
Okay.
I would be delighted if you could tell us about it.
If I can, Chair, fly tipping for the last 2 quarters is red. If you look at the bar charts underneath that, you'll see that in Q4, when it was red, the number of fly tips spiked at 230. And that was about the contractor's ability to respond to dealing with all those fly tips. 35 more than the previous highest quarter. So that did delay them responding to the volume of fly tips in Q4. Q1 of this year coincided with the closure of Slyfield during the work that went on at Slyfield, which meant the contractor had to travel, I think it was 2 additional hours for each round trip with the vehicles to dispose of the waste. So that impacted on general refuse collection, recycling collections, etc., but also impacted on fly tipping response as well. So I think that's the reasoning for those 2 reds there.
No, thank you again. It's most helpful, isn't it, just to get the full story rather than just yeah. I mean, we can understand the difficulties, so it's very helpful. Jenny, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just thank you for your comment on the report. We most certainly will make sure that you don't lose any narrative. In fact, the intention is to try and improve that even more, that sometimes we had commentary on KPIs that were green, and if they're green, then everything's going well. So it's useful just to note that information. So the intention is to slightly adapt the report each quarter as when things are red or amber, to have more narrative in those areas explaining what's happened, what we're doing about it, that kind of thing. So we will make sure that you have the information that you need.
Thanks, Jenny. I mean, that was always the sort of rule, I mean, unwritten from the previous one, was to concentrate on the reds, because obviously the greens, you know, we're very pleased with it. And there's only so many times you can praise a service, you know, without it becoming sort of repetitive. So, you know, I think it is important. But I was trying to look at some of the narratives, some of it, the ones that are there as opposed to the ones that aren't there. Some of them are very short and others are really much longer. So it'll be interesting to see that. And then, of course, background information, we you know, where it's missing at the moment, we can't comment. We don't really know what it's going to be. So we are making very general comments tonight. Is that okay, Jenny? Because, you know, there's no point in homing in on something that's incomplete. Councillor Austin?
Thank you. I would just generally agree with the comments other councillors have made, and the KPIs do, on the face of it, look to be a lot more straightforward, and we'll get used to the report and we'll get better at reading it. I was just on something slightly more specific, looking at planning applications, major planning applications, both red, and I just wanted to get an understanding of what's happening there. Thank you.
Is that the appeals allowed or the...
No, it's KPI.
5,
There you go.
27.
Right. All right, right. Yes. Haven't got anyone who's going to be able to help us on that, but it is that sort of thing that we will be questioning for obvious reasons. But sometimes the background information explains that it's not actually a huge number. I mean, it's, you know, you miss the percentage, but it may be 1 or 2 applications rather than... And in fact, there was something on the news about planning applications, and they didn't give the quantity, they just gave the level of planning applications. Well, a planning application can be anything from a, you know, a little lean-to at the side to, you know, 500 or 600 houses. So, you know, you've got to know what you're talking about to analyse it properly. So that is one we will have to keep an eye on, but we have nobody around this evening who can help us.
Chair.
Right, Councillor Austin? Not Austin. Councillor Townsend first.
Again, on these planning applications, I believe that we are forced to have these targets of 100%, or they might be 80%. Is there any way showing who's actually forcing us to have those targets? Because it might bring us back to a bit more reality in what is red and what is amber and what is green. Because this 100% on all planning applications, I don't believe is our own target. It is actually set by government. But whilst it applies for all planning applications, does it also apply for major applications as well?
These are 80, 90.
Yeah, it's not shown.
I think one of the issues we always have with these is that, you know, up to a point you have to aim for 100%. You know, otherwise you're not aiming for a first class service, and that is always an issue. So if you sort of think, oh, let's go for 80, let's go for 90, you're basically saying we can never deliver the, you know, 100%. So it's a difficult one. Jenny, have you got anything?
Can I?
Yes, certainly, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think Councillor Townsend, I think, makes a really good point about this, which is I think we do need to show where a target has been set, whether it's a local target or a nationally imposed target, because we have different types. So I think we need to be clear about what that target is. And I think then that benchmarking information really helps. I mean, I think we need to set targets that are realistic. I mean, some 100% targets can never be met, but just because of the technical definition of it. You know, for instance, I look at sort of gas servicing in homes, for instance, whereby 99.95 is the highest you'll ever kind of get, because there will always be 1 or 2 that are just fall due on that particular day that you can't technically have. So I think we need to look at how, when we set our own target, kind of that process of how that was set, what that target is in terms of other people's targets, other councils' targets, where that target was in terms of previous year's performance, etc., whether that's impacted on that and whether that's a reasonable target to have. And I certainly think that benchmarking data that we have here in terms of how other councils are performing will allow us to see whether we've got a target that is, and I think you want something that is challenging but attainable, I think, is what we would always ask for with a target.
Can I just come back on that? Because the point about the targets here is that we are in charge of them. Some of the other targets were not, you know, because they go through appeal or whatever. There's other people involved. We're saying here that we ought to be able to determine all planning applications within 26 weeks. That has to be our target, and that is 100%. So, you know, I can see when, certainly when we get onto appeals and that sort of thing, we're not in charge of all the process at all. I can see why we have to be perhaps a little more relaxed, but when it's our workforce, it's a different matter, isn't it? And I'll take Councillor Austin, and then you can come back on that. Councillor Austin.
Sorry, just to say on things like appeals and planning, I don't want to see just the percentage. I think you've made this point already, Councillor Coburn. We need to see the actual numbers as well as the percentage for comparison purposes, because as you say, it could be a massive major application. It could be just be one, or it could be, you know, 50. We don't know. It's hard. Thank you.
Julian, do you want to come back on targets? I'm being unrealistic, am I?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all, Chair. Far be it from me to say that. I mean, I think the 100% is the national policy target in terms of planning. So that's why that's in there. There may be other cases when 100% is absolutely our own local target, and we say, actually, there's no reason why we can't have 100%. There may be others whereby over a period of time, we're aiming towards 100%, but actually for a given year, we say, actually, the increase this year is incremental 5% at a time, for instance, and then we'd make our way towards that direction of travel. So again, just coming back for me to the idea that a target must be challenging for us, but it must also be based on some sort of reality in terms of our ability to hit it.
And from a councillor's point of view, we need to know, as you say, whether it's a local or a national. And then, you know, we know what we're dealing with. I'll take Jenny, and I know Councillor White, who's not with us again, wants to speak, but I'll take Jenny first.
So if you read in the description of each of the KPIs, it does tell you whether it's a national indicator. And obviously, if it doesn't say there that it's a national indicator, then it would be our own indicator. So for example, on major planning applications, the indicator says there that planning applications determined within 13 weeks, that 13 weeks is a government target, and the 80% is a government target, and the national indicator is P151. So that was the first point. The second point is there will definitely be numbers in the report going forward. That is my intention, to include the actual number of planning applications to give more, you know, so that you can realistically see what is 80%, because as you say, 80% of 10 and 80% of 100 is very, very different.
No, totally. I mean, percentages are pointless unless you know the background figures. Councillor White, you wish to join us?
I would love to, Carol. Good evening, everybody. I am here with you, and I'm sorry, my Farnham responsibilities dictated otherwise this afternoon, so I can't be with you. But that's life. Yeah, I understand the KPI thing. I mean, and I know I'm coming a bit sideways, and Carol, you're probably going to shoot me down, but what interests me here is appeals that are not allowed, because they're the ones that cost us, aren't they? And you know, can I just put that in and say, how does that fit with what we're looking at here?
Can I just come back on that? Because people always say that if we lose the appeal, we get costs. We don't. You know, it's not an automatic. I mean, every appeal costs us money because we have to get consultants in, we have to get experts in, we've got officer time and legal advice, and all of that is costly. I did my NPPF consultation response, and I said that, you know, Waverley needed more money to deal with this, you know, because we're not remotely compensated for the cost of appeals. So, but it doesn't follow that because the appeal is allowed, that costs are automatically awarded. I mean, you know, if we've behaved in a reasonable way, it's quite, you know, I don't know how many times costs are actually awarded, but it certainly isn't every time an appeal is allowed. So, you know, that's a slightly false impression. I've heard it before in this council chamber.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is quite an important point, and I think it's something that. So I don't want to digress too much, but it's something that the planning committee need to be perhaps more aware of, because certainly when I came in to the committee at the time last year, there was some serious issues regarding appeals that were going through. And frankly didn't stand a dog's chance of getting through the inspector, and that was going to leave us with a heavy bill. That was the way it was sold to me. And Carol, if that's not the case, then I think maybe that's something we should address at planning.
I think we should. I think that's the forum for that, not this one. I think
I agree.
we should address. But I mean, any committee has to make decisions on policy and the information before them. And as long as we have done that in any committee, we cannot be challenged. But if we've made a decision on incorrect information or not enough information, then our decisions can always be challenged. Fortunately, not too many of them are. Can we sort of move on slightly? I'm not sure that we're going to gain very much more from going through this. We only go up to 23 anyway. Under this, doesn't look very much when you say it like that. And I think, you know, there's too much missing for us to make terribly meaningful comments on it, other than on the format. Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just while we're talking about planning appeals, I know this is a draft, but one thing that confused me about KPI 9 a little bit was the fact that the KPI is planning appeals allowed, where lower outturn is better, and then in the background information we've got percentage of appeals dismissed, where a higher turnout would be better. So if they could be aligned.
Well spotted. I hadn't spotted that, but yeah, it's true.
One of the things I didn't have time to resolve before this was sent out, but the rest of Surrey measures, as you've seen, the number of planning appeals refused, and we do the opposite. And so that's one of the things that I do need to iron out. So yeah, in the next quarter, it will match up.
The important thing again is that we know what we're looking at, you know, but it would be helpful if those two things were aligned. I know we can take, you know, 30 from 100 and make 70. I mean, but it would be good to have a sort of consistency through. But we've always worked on, you know, 30% is what we, you know, would consider our target. And for many a long year, you know, that's what we actually did. 2/3 in old money as far as I'm concerned, but, you know, not quite. Any other comment on this? What can we send Jenny away with? Certainly, I think praise for the format. I think that's really going to work. Praise for the simple, you know, bar charts and information and the benchmarking against other councils. I think that really helps us. In the background information, we can't really talk about the narrative because so much of it is not there. So I'm sure that will be remedied. Does anybody else like to particularly pick out anything that they think is useful for Jenny? Or should we just tell her to carry on as she's doing?
Carry on as you're doing.
Is everyone agreed that, you know, we like this
Yeah.
new format? We think when we get used to it, we'll be able to see, you know, more clearly, and we will, I promise you, only ask questions on the reds. And we will just nod the greens through because, well, we won't have enough time anyway. But no, I thought it was really, I mean, it was an interesting document. There was something more interesting looking at this, whether it's, you know, just spread out better. I don't know what it was, but it was easier somehow than looking at the old KPI, the way, the previous format. So thank you very much, Jenny, for turning up again and presenting this to us so clearly, and we look forward to the finished document. So that's coming to us when? Or when do you? Sorry, Kizzy. That I hope you've been making copious notes, and that you know, what's oh, you've got one written down, have you, in the agenda? So what does the actual recommendation say, please, Kizzy?
Under its remit as set out in Annex 1 of the report, and makes any recommendations to the joint management team or the executive as appropriate. And that's agreed.
Can I just yes, I was just going to say, sorry, Kizzy, could you just repeat that again?
Oh, so the recommendation
Yeah.
is recommended that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider the performance of the service area under its remit as set out in Annex 1 to this report, and makes any recommendations to the joint management team or executive as appropriate.
Right, I think we feel it's premature.
That's okay. It is recommended that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider the performance of the service area under its remit.
Can I stop you there? I think it's premature to consider the performance in the areas that we look at, because we haven't got the full information on all of them. So it'd be pointless to say, well, there's a little bit there, a little bit there. So I think we, you know, what was the second half? Please.
Yep. Remit set out in Annex 1 to this report, and make any recommendations to the joint management team or the executive as appropriate.
Thank you. I think our recommendations are, as we've all said, you know, to carry on with the format, complete the background information. If there's a slight mismatch between the existing KPI and the background information, can we make sure that's clear? Can we also make sure what the targets are, whether they are sort of stress it to us, Jenny, because sometimes we skip over these things, which ones are national, which ones are local. Is there anything I've missed out from that?
Maybe, Chair, that Gormez is
Right, and I think that's a very good one, that we, the committee looks forward to a more, to a complete version of this in November, so that we can make fully informed comments at that meeting. Is that agreed? Councillor Keane?
So we're adding that to recommendation to the Overview and Scrutiny that's on page 14. Yeah, thank you.
The reason I was asking Kizzy to read it out was for people who haven't got page 14. You're sitting on your sofa at home, you probably haven't got it. So, right. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Austin.
Sorry, I just, I think it is a bit premature, that recommendation. I would just do the second bit and not the first bit, that we're considering the draft report. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realise you wanted to get, you see, that's not in addition to the first bit, it's instead of.
Well, yes, because at the moment, what we're basically saying is it's premature to comment this time
Yes.
at this meeting on the performance indicators because they are incomplete.
Yes,
so
that's fine, we're all agreed. Thank you.
Yeah. But you know, we hope that this work continues and we have all those extra things that we said. And in November at the meeting, when we have the up-to-date document, that we can then make some detailed comments on the service areas within our remit. Does that all make perfect sense? Thank you very much. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Richard. Right, which brings us to the third item that is on the agenda, the next item on the agenda. I've got so much paper here, I can't see. Wood for the trees.
67.
Right. So moving on to item 8, the Thriving Community Commissioning Fund. This is really quite exciting. Not enough money in it, of course, as we know, but who is going to introduce this? And is that you, sir? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank Jane, who's here this evening, for writing the report and for all the work that she does with the Thriving Commissioning Fund. It's a huge piece of work and it's absolutely essential for the council in working with our voluntary and community faith sectors, and no one knows that sector as well as Jane does at Waverley. So this is, as you say, Chair, very, very exciting. The report sets out for you 3 things, really, that we would like from the committee, if possible, tonight. Not only does it give you the background of what the Thriving Communities Fund Commissioning Fund actually is, it's asking that we are proposing to extend it for a second round. All money's within the budget, but as you rightly say, Chair, not enough. But it's what we've got. So we would like your comment on extending this round for the second time, and the procedure that involves, and that has been highlighted in the report for you. The other thing that is different this year that we would like to make a recommendation for and would seek your support or your comments in making that recommendation is that we bring out from the fund CAB, the Citizens Advice Bureau, and Hopper, which is a transport service. And the reason we are asking for that is I think we have to be very clear that this round of funding will be extremely competitive. There are funding cuts all over the place. We are proposing this for our communities of Waverley, and therefore we will have agencies that are asking for money. Now, that's great, but if we keep in that pot the CAB and Hopper, we are at risk of having to reduce their funding to meet the demands of everybody and everyone that is applying to us. Not that I think we're going to be able to meet the demands of everybody, but the CAB and Hopper are pretty much extensions of council services. They are absolutely vital to our most vulnerable. The first being that Hopper enable connectivity amongst rural communities and provide essential transport services. They have also supported us when we've needed their help with things such as waterworks. In Farnham recently, Jane negotiated a situation for us where they were able to step in and provide a bus route to the most vulnerable because we wouldn't be able to get them to where we needed to get to otherwise. And the second is the CAB, which is an essential independent service that offers support to the most vulnerable and helps us as a council, particularly in terms of housing and homelessness prevention, rents, arrears, the cost of living crisis, all of those things that ultimately support us in having to take eviction action or problematic action that is going to be detrimental to the community. So that's why we're recommending that we pull those 2 out, and therefore shrink the fund a little bit because we've secured their funding under a service level agreement, or a funding agreement, I should say. So we would like your opinion on that and whether you think that's the right way. And then finally, we would like, as part of the panel for the Thriving Communities application, somebody from this committee to be on that panel with us. And it would be great in terms of governance if it was one person from this committee, Chair, who doesn't have any trustee obligations anywhere, so that we have complete, transparency. You might decide that that's not necessary. You're happy for anyone to come, but in an ideal world, a non-trustee can be non-biased. Not that I'm saying there would be, but do you know what I mean, from the outside world. And that, Chair, is the introduction. Welcome your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we should start backwards actually and sort out our representative. But you're absolutely right about being a trustee. I mean, you're not really that much use to people when you're a trustee when it comes to this sort of thing. As I've learned over the years, you know, you're quite useful at the meetings, but you know, you're often much more useful speaking up here. So do we have any volunteers for that role? Oh, well, do I have it? Do I have anybody who's going to oppose that? Or are you quite happy for Jackie to?
No, I've got loads of trustee obligations, so I'm very happy for.
No, that's fine. Councillor Keane, you are.
Yeah, I'm a trustee for Penny Henley Trust in Haslemere, but nothing to do with the Hopper or CAB.
It's the other ones that are the problem ones, because CAB and Hopper were hoping to remove from the fund and give them a service level or a funding agreement. But it's the sort of organisation that will apply to the fund. So that's, if you're a trustee of too many of those, you're going to have a clash too often. That's the thing. But if you're not, well, you can give it to World, Councillor Keane, and if it really isn't working, then
For me, Chair, that and talking to Jen, that of course would be great. We would welcome your expertise. Obviously, if any group that you are a trustee of do apply, then we would probably just ask you to step back at that point. But I don't foresee that being a problem at all. So thank you.
Can I just offer my services if Jackie's not available, that you can put me in there as a backup for Jackie?
Thank you. That would be great. Thank you, Councillor Townsend.
well, that sounds like a very suitable outcome there with two good people who I know serve the committee well. So this takes us back to the main thing, which is to look at the Thriving Communities Fund. We're not making any decisions on who's going to get it. It's about the second round of this and the funding for the next 3 years. I take it there's a 3-year cycle and agreement that we can go ahead with, you know, doing a new cycle, and also that, as you can see, the way you apply for this and the sort of criteria that we're looking for to get these funds. I don't know, was it not almost twice the number of people as actually got the funds last time, if I remember from reading the report? You know, it is a very limited fund, and obviously people will get what the fund can afford. But as I say, that's not for us. And I take it as well that the actual amount of the fund will perhaps vary through the budget process. So there's no point in sort of having a figure. But the point is, do you have any views on taking the CAB out and Hopper, and what's your views on that? And do you have any views just generally on the fund in particular? Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think realistically, Citizens Advice and Hopper are both services that we have to provide support to. Not only because it's the right thing to do for residents, but there's no sort of feasible way that Waverley could meet that unmet demand without them. So it seems pretty pointless to make them go through a competitive bidding process if we know we're going to be offering our support to them. So to give them the certainty of knowing that that funding is coming, then I think it's very sensible. In terms of the rest of the process, so from the report, it sounds like round one worked very well. So I'm content that second round is run without any significant changes other than removing those two services. My only comment I did have, minor comment relating to the the whole process, but the application form really, and whether we should think about requesting a reference from an existing donor or funder of the organisation. I guess this would be based on feedback from the previous round, but just to get their view on what it's been like for them working with that organisation, whether they've had the financial information that they've requested in a timely manner and performance information. just as part of the decision-making process. But I don't know if that's necessary. If all organisations in the previous round came back promptly with the relevant KPIs or whatever we've asked for, then not a problem. But just a thought.
One of the big issues when you're doing a second round is that, of course, all the people in the first round are probably wanting to reapply, and you also want to be generous to newcomers, and getting that balance right is always a nightmare for funding. I mean, Jane, I'm surprised you're still going. I mean, she's been doing this for so long, sorting out. Oh, I mean, you know, she's tremendous at it, but it is difficult, you know, trying to sort of be fair to everybody and work out which, you know, organisation deserves a specific amount. Councillor Keane?
Yes, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Busby. I think certainly from a point of view of the CAB, I think they're going to be inundated with people needing help, especially the elderly now. So I would be more than happy to see them taken out. And certainly again with the Hopper, they do such a fantastic job with getting the elderly from A to B. I very often see them, you know, helping the disabled pensioners off the bus, you know, just to go to Tesco's and things like that. So, or the surgery. So I think it's vital that they have the funding. You're always going to have organisations that are applying that are going to lose out, but that's the way of the beast, I'm afraid. And it's just looking into detail. But I do agree with Councillor Busby that it would be quite helpful if we did have sort of extra information from people that have dealt with these organisations. So I think that's always a good thing to have.
Sammy, you should come back.
Thank you, Chair. We've definitely noted that, and I think that's a great idea. And I think I'd like to also say to the committee that we're also going to be very mindful on the panel of having colleagues who are also commissioners. So we will have NHS colleagues, we will have Surrey County Council colleagues, because what we're finding is there is a lot of double up. So as money becomes difficult for all organisations, it's really important that we align our funding so that we've all got the same objective to help the vulnerable, and from our perspective for it to be an inclusive borough, which is great. But I'm very cautious, and I know Jane is as well, that we're not repeating so that people are getting a double set of funding and we might miss out somebody else who hasn't had funding from anyone. So I think that feeds into the whole kind of wider governance that we're going to be really hot on for round two, more intensely, I could suggest, in round one, purely because of the disparity of funds nationally.
That's a really good point. Councillor Austin?
Thank you. I agree with what everyone's saying. The amounts that will go from the community support fund were effectively mirroring the 95k existing for Hopper and the 150k from Waverley to Citizens Advice Southwest Surrey. Yeah, okay. And it's interesting to see Guildford has 250k under a 3-year contract. We're 150k every year.
Yeah, so with our funding, the funding is for a 3-year period, and that funding stays the same each year over that 3-year period. So the 150, it would be for each of those years. Previous to this scheme, given the constraints and competitiveness for funding, of Citizens Advice funding was 250 at Waverley, and it reduced to the 150. That's the pressure on the pot. So, and that's part of the reason for ring fencing that funding and moving it out to secure the funding that they have at the moment.
I'll take Julian in a moment. I just wanted to say that when I was first a councillor, councillors had a say in funding. It was pointless. You've never known, it was the most pointless exercise. Nobody could agree. And, you know, and they would say, well, you know, they're getting £25 more than that they're getting. I mean, it really was awful, wasn't it? And, you know, and I was so grateful when funding you know, the detail of funding was removed totally from councillors. So, you know, we come in when all the hard work's been done and just make sure that nobody's been missed out or that somebody has been treated too generously. But really, you know, it is desperately hard, and, you know, by any committee to come up with a fund, and by a bunch of councillors, believe you me, they all mean well. It's, you know, it's not that, but can I just take Julian, because he indicated earlier.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I was going to make the point, I think, about the direct commissioning of services, especially to the CAB, that not just is that protecting the funding, but it's actually developing the relationship, I think, with the CAB. So there's a difference between a commissioned relationship and a grant-funded relationship. It does allow us to work more closely with the CAB on alignment of priorities, on feedback, on outcomes, etc., and to do that alongside the other agencies that are working in that field. So I think commissioning gives us more than just that protection of cash, which is great in itself, I think, and essential, but it does offer us a better chance to shape an ongoing relationship that benefits and contributes to corporate outcomes.
Councillor Keane.
Yes, going back to what you were saying, Chairman, about the councillors having input. I mean, the awful thing was that everybody was fighting their own corner, basically. They all wanted funding for their own groups, and we couldn't get anywhere. So it is a much better scheme that you actually tell us what we should be looking at.
Right, does anybody have any further comments on this, or can we move to the recommendations? We'll do those in the right order, but now I found them. Right, so the first one, I take it these are the recommendations, Kizzy, on page 68. Right. So the committee considers the report, makes any recommendations. I think we've done that. So we agree the process for the second round of the Thriving Communities Fund as set out in the report. Agreed. Is that agreed by us all?
Agree.
And also the proposal to transfer funding for citizens' advice and the Hopper to the council's community service budget, basically to come to a funding arrangement with these people under whatever way, funding agreement, whatever that is, as opposed to a service level agreement. So are you all agreeable to that?
Agreed.
And finally, just to note that our nominated representative is Councillor Jackie Keane, with her very able stand-in, Councillor Philip Townsend, if necessary. And in fact, if there's a meeting, I suppose, where one of you does have meetings, you could swap out at that point. It's entirely in your hands. Yes. Right, thank you very much, Sam. Unless there's anything else you wish to say. Thank you again, and Jane, for your patience. Thank you very much. And thank you to the committee. That's the end of the meeting, I think, Kizzy. Thank you very much. Safe journey.